Good afternoon, everybody. It is May 4th. This is the Transportation and Environment Committee Worksession, committee meeting, and we are having a work session on various items of the FY24 proposed budget. And the first item on today's agenda is the Department of Environmental Protection General Fund and Water Quality Protection Fund and the Climate Change Planning Non-Departmental Account. I see we have all of DEP's leadership here and our new acting director as well, Mr. Weiner. Nice to see you. I will start with Mr. Levchenko to kick off the walk through the packet.
All right, as you mentioned, we have the DEP budget today broken out by fund. That's why you're seeing it in a couple different places. We have the General Fund and the Water Quality Protection Fund and the Climate Change Planning NDA, which are treated in the first packet. And then we have the Solid Waste Collection and Disposal Funds, collectively part of the Recycling and Resource Management Division of DEP. And that's presented as the second packet today. And then we also do have some CIP items after that, some additional amendments that came over from the executive in mid-March regarding the stormwater management CIP, which we'll take up after we conclude with the DEP budget. So just as the full breadth of what we're covering today. So just to start, I'll sort of do a quick summary of the fiscal summary of the budget. For the general fund, the executive's recommended budget is $9.99 million, which is an increase of $2.4 million, as well as 5 new positions. It's a significant increase in the general fund budget. As I note in the packet, for many years the general fund budget was quite small, as the water quality protection side got much larger and larger and larger in response to the state permit requirements that it had to deal with within the Water Quality Protection Fund. Now, for the most part, those increases are related to climate change related initiatives, which we'll, I'm sure, talk a lot about today. And those new initiatives, you have the same issue with other budgets. They're all going to go on the reconciliation list. The issue today, they all go on the reconciliation list if you agree that they are sufficiently needed in order to do that. Certainly they don't have to if the committee feels that they don't. But if they do go on the reconciliation list, the committee has to, or has been directed by the council president, who happens to be here today, to identify whether they're priority or high priority items. So that's a sort of a key element here. And then the other significant piece of increase is related to the Tree Montgomery program. There's a big increase, about $750,000, which echoes the supplemental appropriation that the council approved earlier this year to continue the work uninterrupted in FY23. Now, the Tree Montgomery Fund does have a dedicated revenue source, although it's in the general fund. So the revenue, if we were not to approve that full increase, that would not free up resources for other activities. So from staff's perspective, that is not the same issue of whether it goes in the reconciliation list and whether it's prioritized. It's just, I think it's more of a straightforward issue of whether you agree that it's time to increase that fund. So those are the two main elements in the general fund. And I'll direct you to, let's see, first the Tree Montgomery program on page 7 of the packet. I have a little more detail here. It talks about the how the fund was set up initially under Bill 3512 back in 2013, and how the tree planting effort has increased significantly over that time, and also some of the cost information. And as I mentioned earlier, there was a supplemental appropriation approved earlier. In terms of numbers, we're looking at in the neighborhood of 3,800 to 4,000 trees per year at this point, assuming that additional $750,000 is included in the budget. There are, the costs are noted per tree. As I've noted before, because of the unique aspects of the tree canopy law allocating these resources, staff is supportive of this increase since it reflects work that DEP is able to do, and it's resources that are available in the Tree Montgomery Fund. So staff is supportive of this recommended increase by the executive. And by the way, we have plenty of folks here today who can speak to the program specifics if you have questions about how the program is run or how they allocate the tree planting.
You want to take a pause there?
Sure.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that presentation, and you did correctly summarize my directive to the council about recognizing the budget situation that we're in, and that while there is a $500 million addition being proposed from 6.3 to 6.8 billion dollars, it is very contingent on the 10% proposed property tax. And for the public who is following this conversation, I recently had a conversation with somebody who very impassionately shared with me their interest and our shared concern about the environment and about the need to fund DEP and to continue the good work of DEP, and to accept the county executive's budget recommendations. And then I asked this person, do you support all of those recommendations and the 10% property tax increase that is proposed? And the person looked at me confused and didn't understand the correlation between the two. And while the 10% property tax increase is specifically earmarked for MCPS, it is the rest of the discretionary budget that is earmarked to fund the rest of county government. And so if we want to fund MCPS and provide quality salaries for our teachers, competitive salaries for our teachers, provide for programs for our students, we need to find that funding. And if we don't have a property tax at a 10% increase, we need to use the general operating funds, which have to come from somewhere else. And so I just want to level set with everybody because I am fully committed to mitigating climate change and to the work of DEP, but there are a lot of competing interests in this budget. And so I think it's important to level set because people are very attuned to this conversation. So if I could just circle back a little bit, I have a question about the Water Quality Protection Fund, and I know that is a sizable increase in debt service over the next 6 years or so. If Mr. Weiner, if you could talk about it, or if someone else on your team, Ms. Wan, if she wants to talk about it.
Yes, I can answer those questions.
Just quickly,
Yeah.
When I concluded with the general fund.
Yeah.
I had not talked about the
Oh,
Water
okay.
Quality Protection Fund yet.
I'm just going through.
So I think the most efficient way to do it would be to go by fund if we
Yeah,
could.
let's just do it that way. That's fine. Okay.
So
General fund.
Let's take your trees first.
Yeah, let's do that.
And in that context, I concluded the discussion about trees, and then the next portion of that would be our discussion about the climate change initiatives.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So I'm supportive of the staff's recommendation on the tree fund, and I just had a couple of questions regarding that. Have we been able to keep up with the market cost per tree? Sorry. Just knowing everything
We
is
brought
going
our
on.
entourage.
Okay.
Good afternoon, I'm Laura Miller with, for the record, with Department of Environmental Protection. We have not kept up with the market costs. The fee that goes into the fund is well below the market cost. I'm not sure if it was ever expected to meet that cost. And at this time, our costs per tree have been increasing over the years, and we expect it to increase a good bit this year because right now we do have a new contract on the street. We haven't had to update the contract in, I think, 4 years. So with this new contract, we're also going to increase our cost again.
Great, thanks. And while you're here, do we keep track of how many trees are surviving after like a year or two after planting?
Yes, ma'am, we do. We check all the trees initially after they're planted, and then most of the trees are credited towards the MS4 requirements or permitting, so that requires an inspection every 3 years. So we're actually accumulating fairly long-term mortality rates, which is a little bit different than the rest of the industry, which only provides mortality rates after the first or second year when the warranties end. But our mortality rates throughout the entire length of the program since 2015 are still below, averaging 5 to 6%, which is well below the industry average of 10 to 12%.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Turn back.
Thank you.
Trees, just on trees.
Yes, yes.
We're good.
So we're good, so we'll accept council recommendation on that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, the climate change discussion.
I'm sorry, Keith,
Oh.
Mr. Levchenko. So in this section, you talk about the staffing and vacancies, but they're kind of spread out. So at what point are we going to talk about that?
I was thinking we would talk about those holistically,
Okay.
sort of department-wide, and I think that's a little bit easier, rather than get sort of bogged down in it in each section.
Well,
if you prefer.
and so I appreciate the question. So again, just some level setting and some broader understanding. While we have been undergoing this budget process, I did send a memo to the county executive about 2.5 weeks ago, requesting some non-recommended staffing reductions or lapses as another recognition that there are 1,200 to 1,500 vacancies on any given day. And as we're trying to work through this budget and determine the priorities and high priorities, we want to make sure that we're not spending money or earmarking money on positions that are not filled. And so what a conversation I had with the county executive and with the CAO were that while we hear in all of our packets throughout the council committee work, there are itemized positions, which a number of us have talked about throughout the various committees, but the county executive and I agreed that hiring and personnel management is inherently an executive function, and so that we would have questions about the broader picture, as Mr. Levchenko noted, and try not to pick out any one position or two, but as Councilmember Balcom noted, we certainly should ask about staffing, about capacity, and about capability should those funds not come through.
Thank you. So I do have a couple questions, page 4. So my understanding, we have 14 active, which is they're in the process. They will most likely be hired and on board by July. I would, or somewhere around there, I would assume.
Good afternoon, Vicki Wan, Acting Deputy Director. I am prepared to answer the questions that you have, and I would like to discuss our vacancies as a whole. What you see on page 4 is actually vacancies pertaining to only the general fund and the Water Quality Protection Fund. So departmentally, we look at positions, not by fund, but by people and their functions. So we have positions that are funded to multiple funds. So administration, for example, overhead, personnel, HR, procurement, all of those financial positions are funded through multiple funds. So we're not looking at, one vacancy equals one fund, and so that's a little bit complicated. And also, as I look through our vacancies and as I look through, all of the numbers, I who have done this day in and day out for the past year, we're getting confused. So I wanted to bring to you, a summation that was clear and concise and not confusing. And so I'm going to attempt to do that. So sorry for the long, drawn-out explanation. So I'm going to talk about DEP holistically in terms of our vacancies. So in total, in the beginning of FY23, we had 35 vacancies out of 197 positions. so about 17.7% of the entire department. Throughout the entire fiscal year, we have filled 15 positions. We are about to close on 16 positions. So that's 31 total positions we've worked on. However, of those positions, we had internal promotions, and we also had 11 positions that left DEP within that same time period. So while we were making progress on our efforts, we were also moving backwards because we had some movement. We encourage internal promotion. So this Sunday, we're filling 2 positions. They're both internal positions. So we're right back to ground zero because we're moving positions, staff person from one to another. So at the end of the day, currently, as of today, we stand in the analysis that's done in this packet was actually a time in January. So since then, we've also made a lot of progress. So as of today, we stand at 15 true vacancies, 4 of which are 100% general funded. And part of this analysis with, the large, I noticed the packet here talked about dollar amounts. When we talk about dollar amounts, it's of course by fund. Some of those positions are, again, split between multiple funds. So 2 of those positions are the director and the deputy director, which encompasses about 20-25% of that total number. And then, of course, we have our split administration staff that, we proceeded with hiring. So truly, we're looking at 4 general funded positions that are still vacant at this time.
So thank you for that. But the other funds are the ones where you're asking for new positions. Is that correct?
Well, there's new ones requested in the general fund and in the Water Quality Protection Fund.
Right. So if there are, and I know it's confusing, and I know that you know far more than I do about this. However, we have to look at if there are positions, not necessarily to get rid of the position, but look at the lapse to see if the lapse is an appropriate lapse or not, and to see whether whether these positions will be filled in FY24, and when will they be filled in FY24. So I think that I'm not done with the conversation because we have to continue. We have to look at the new position. So in my opinion, we have to do one or the other. We either have to increase the lapse on the vacancies, or look at the new positions and see if we can use the vacancies to fill the new positions. But I'm not comfortable saying accepting the full vacancies and funding new positions at the same time.
And we have looked exactly at that. This past year, across all of our divisions, we have reclassified and repurposed multiple positions to ensure that we meet the demands of current work. So some of these 4 positions in the general fund, one of which is a new manager for climate programs that's being advertised now. And so 2 of the positions that we are holding vacant right now, we're holding back those positions in particular to allow this manager, once we fill it, to come in to establish their team. So that was the intent behind that vacancy.
Okay.
I appreciate the thoughtful analysis, and clearly there is a strategy behind the vacancies, as you've noted. And I think if you're trying to build a team of 3 or 4, you hire the manager and then allow the manager to help provide some input as to who's part of that team. I absolutely get that. And as you noted, the problem that is occurring is not unique to DEP. It's akin to Texas two-step, take 1 step forward, one or 2 steps back, the hokey pokey, however we want to classify it. It is a problem across county government, and it's an employment issue at large as well. And so as you noted, there are 4 current vacant positions. One's a manager of climate action, and the goal was to have, is it 2 or 3 underneath that manager?
2.
And then what's the last vacant
The
position?
last one is a BEPS admin helpline in which the position description is being developed and worked on. They were filling the team, which they have just completed the vacancy. We're onboarding the staff now to bring this last position on as well.
And to Councilmember Balcom's point, the other positions that you're hoping to create, that's not in the general fund, so we'll get to that later. Well, yeah, okay.
Thank you. I just had a, so I see what the 4 new positions would do on the climate change related initiatives. But if I'm reading this correctly, there are also 5 other new positions out of the general fund, and I don't think I saw a description of what they would do in the packet, but I may have missed it.
They start on page 8 of the packet, the positions we are requesting. Are these the transfer? No, add climate. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the other 5 based on the numbers, are actually not new positions. Those are transfers. So the new positions are the ones you see for the climate change related in the chart on page 8, the four FTEs.
Right, so on the cover page, in the box, where it says general funds, and then the first bullet underneath that is 9.99 million, and it says 5 new positions.
Oh,
I'm just curious where there's.
Yeah, Rich Harris, Office of Management and Budget. There's 3 positions that are funded by the NDA that we'll talk about in a little bit. Those 3 positions are being transferred from being in that budget to DEP, so that's 3 of them. There's an additional climate change related position that is right now in the CEX budget and the county executive's budget, which is also moving to DEP in the
Right, so they're shifts, not new positions. Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify.
And they're filled.
And they're all
filled
filled.
positions.
So,
I just want to clarify. So the ask for this budget then is for 4 new positions under the climate change work.
for the general fund. Yeah.
From the general, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. I'm good now.
okay. So what I want to do is kind of put a pause on that conversation about those specific positions, because I want to honor at least the spirit of the conversation I had with the county executive and the CAO about not cherry picking specific positions. This is this budget process. We still have about 2 long weeks to go. And I expect there will be many more public and private conversations as to how to address these. And so is that okay with you, Councilmember?
Yes, in the process of trying to move us forward, but I feel like, you know, we at some point we have to address the vacancy issue.
I agree.
Okay.
And I know it causes a little agita, right? Because these are big budgetary items when put together. Mm-hmm. And so if we don't address them, it doesn't get us to the goal of trying to create a balanced, fair, and equitable budget. But as we conclude this conversation, as we work through this conversation today and over the next few days, when we as a full council come back to these particular items, I suspect we will have more clarity through some more conversation. And I think the county executive and his team, notwithstanding those who are here, will be able to provide some further input on their own personnel management. You can take that leap of faith.
And just to add to that, the Water Quality Protection Fund, as well as the Solid Waste Fund, they are dedicated funds used to for specific tasks.
We understand
Right.
that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Okay.
Yeah,
So-
I did want to note, I mean, the council staff recommendation was to increase lapse. It's noted on page 4. And that's not based on an expert analysis of what you just heard about all these vacancies. What it is more historically, they've been, over the past several years, at about 13 to 15 vacancies at any given time. And the lapse rate that the executive is recommending is below that. Do I know what the right number is? No. Be the first one to say that. But if they're running $1 million+ in lapse savings this year, staff felt that there's probably going to be more lapse next year, as you heard, as they fill the positions. They've got new positions to fill. They've got positions to fill from resignations. Those are often filled from within, so then you have the transfers creating new vacancies. So it's a guess, but staff felt that somewhere between what the executive had recommended and what the kinds of savings that they were seeing, at least through their second quarterly analysis of FY23, was a reasonable guess.
I understand that, and I think what's important for this item right before us is we are not adding anything, right? So we're not adding to the budget. We are not specifically going to make a recommendation to increase the lapse right now, because there will be another conversation about county lapses across the board, and so the county executive, my expectation is that the county executive will provide further guidance as to where those lapses, his priorities for where those lapses would be. So,
Okay.
so Mr. Wolchek,
And actually, I
keep
think that is the best approach, to have a more consistent approach across departments if we could do that.
That's what we're going to do. Okay, so let's keep going through. You can turn your mic on, Keith. Thank you. So, turn your mic back on. There we go.
Sorry about that. Let's go to page 8 of the packet. I have a table that summarizes the new climate change related initiatives in the executive's recommended budget for DEP. This does not have the Tree Montgomery piece. That is referred to in the climate change initiatives as well, but because we've already discussed that and has a separate funding issue, I pulled that out of this. So these remaining issues or items add up to about $1.3 million and 4 new positions. And I've got information from DEP for each of these items listed in the packet. And then I have some thoughts about how we might prioritize these at the end. But I think the most efficient thing is to maybe do this more in a question and answer format. To the degree you have questions about any of these particular items beyond what's answered in the packet, we have the folks here that can answer those. Or if you want to go directly to the prioritization, we can do that.
So I'm good with a good old conversation, and you want to structure that within the climate change portfolio?
Yeah, we have the initiatives here. I mean, I think maybe Stan or
yeah, I was going to ask DEP, whomever
or
you'd
Vicky,
like, to walk us through and talk about the progress you've been making and the work that needs to get done. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you.
I was looking over here, but you're over there.
Stan Edwards, the Chief of the Division of Energy, Climate, and Compliance in DEP. Turns out our goals that we set are hard to reach, and we're working quite diligently on lots of different fronts. The major sectors, as we all know, are energy generation, energy use in buildings, and transportation. And so the recommendations in the budget this year cover all 3 of those areas to some extent. We built capacity last year. This is adding to that capacity. So just looking at the table on page 8, we also are very focused on equity as we address climate change. So that first item there, climate capacity building for community organizations. We have to work with partners in the community if we have any hope of achieving our goals, particularly in underserved communities. And there are a lot of community-based organizations that do great work in Montgomery County, but they're not generally focused on climate change, or haven't been historically focused on climate change. But they recognize that that is an important issue they need to get involved in, but they don't have the resources to do that. And so this request here would help us provide funding to community-based organizations to build their capacity to deal with climate issues. So that's the first item there. You've heard a lot about BEPS. You'll be hearing more about BEPS going forward. We're working on the regulations right now. Lindsay Shaw, who's here and can come up and answer questions if you have anything specific about BEPS, has led that effort. And one of the things that we know is that there are many under-resourced buildings in the county that will have a challenging time reaching BEPS standards, regardless of how stringent we set those standards. And we are proposing to fund, again, help to those under-resourced buildings to meet BEPS. I would say this is a down payment on that effort. You heard earlier today from the Montgomery County Green Bank. They're a huge partner in this work with us. In the District of Columbia, for example, they set up a separate entity to help finance and provide information to building owners about meeting their BEPS requirements. We view the Green Bank as our corollary to that and are working closely with them. And so this is part of that effort to help under-resourced buildings meet BEPS. The third item on the list is for community choice energy consultant support. Community choice energy would allow the county to become the energy supplier to residences and small businesses in the county. It's never been done in the states, never been done in the Mid-Atlantic. We don't have that expertise in the county. We've been working for 18 months now with the Public Service Commission on a work group to establish regulations. We've had some consultant support in the past. This consultant support will be critical going forward if we're to launch that program, which still has some hurdles. There are some big hurdles, and you'll hear a lot more about that because the council has to approve enabling legislation to allow us to launch the Community Choice Energy Program. So we'll come back to you with more information about that. Now, I'm just going to skip down. We can talk about the positions, but I'm going to just stick with the operating expenses. So that I guess it's the fifth item on the list is electric vehicle co-op management. Transportation is the other big sector we're working on. And again, we work in the private sector, not the things that DGS and transportation do on the county's fleet. We're trying to encourage the private sector to use more electric vehicles, and that involves purchasing of vehicles and establishment of charging infrastructure. And the co-op is something we started last year to try to work with dealers to provide information and financial incentives, if possible, to Montgomery County residents interested in purchasing an EV. And the co-op has been successful. We got a lot of people to sign up. We've got partnerships with dealers. And this is to help just take that to the next step, to try to increase the number of EVs. And again, Ms. Shaw can provide more details on that if you're interested in learning more about that. And then finally, grants. So we've requested some funding to help identify and obtain grants. We all have heard, if we had $1 for every email we've got from someone saying, hey, have you heard about this grant? We wouldn't need to be asking for this funding because we'd be very wealthy. There's lots of funding out there. We don't know all the details about that. And grants are difficult. I will just say there's a lot of process around finding grants, applying for grants, tracking the activity under a grant, managing a grant. And so this request on the operating expense side is to utilize consultants that have expertise in that work, identifying grants, helping to write grants. And you'll notice above that we're requesting 2 positions devoted to grants. And grants are used across the county government. And so some people have asked, why does DEP need separate grant staff? We need people that are climate and energy related people who also have an understanding of grants. It's nice to have people who can identify a grant for you and say, hey, you ought to apply for this, but then the staff, we don't have the capacity to delve into that. So what we're requesting here are positions that are climate experts, energy experts, but also grant experts to help us achieve that. And we think that funding will pay back many times over, because when you can get a big grant, that offsets a lot of operating costs that you might need. And again, those grants would be used for things like supporting under-resourced buildings under BEPS, for vehicle charging infrastructure, for lots of different climate-related activities. And then we have 2 other positions we're requesting, one related to solar technical expertise. There's a lot of interest in solar in a broad variety of ways, on rooftops, ground mount solar, community solar, even large-scale utility solar. And we don't have an expert in solar in the department or in the county. And this will help us have that capacity to answer lots of questions that come up about solar. And then finally, a position for residential electrification. We have a program right now that we're launching to encourage and provide incentives to residential properties to electrify their properties. This again is a difficult task. If you're a homeowner and you don't really understand, you might have gas heat, gas stove, you don't really understand how to do that conversion, you're looking for experts. And often what happens if you go to an HVAC contractor and say, I want to replace my gas heat, they'll say, great, we've got an efficient gas system. I can take out that old inefficient gas system, put you in a new gas system. And what we're trying to do is get people to convert to an electric heat pump, for example. And lots of contractors right now don't do work in both those spaces. And so they're not, a homeowner's not necessarily getting full information. And this, with these incentives and the information program we're launching, which this position would manage, we would be able to give residents a lot more information and connect them with the right resources to convert to electrification.
Thank you for that very thoughtful presentation on the, as I know, the $1.3 million request for programs, grant programs, and also staffing to facilitate the important work that's being done. I absolutely understand the need for all of these. I think some of them might be premature with regard to other processes and programs that the county is currently working on. And let me take a step back and explain. Let me start at the end with regard to the residential electrification and the solar technical experience. On one hand, I absolutely understand the need to convert to electric. I supported the bill last year that will require future residential buildings to only be electric, and if we see what just happened in New York, that went statewide. So I expect that to happen here as well. If the goal is to have people to convert to electric, to me that is a public relations campaign. And it is less so having somebody providing technical assistance or matchmaking interested residents with technicians who can do that, but it's compelling our residents. And I think that's actually what most of this is, from the grants that would be in the community to the technical expertise which occupy a few of these positions. It is a coordinated PR strategy to explain to residents that this is not only good for them as homeowners or renters or property owners, but also as humans on our planet. And as good stewards to future generations. And I'm not sure that as presented, they provide the best utility at this time. Reprogramming some of them to try to convey the climate emergency that we are in, rather than providing technical assistance for people who might not even be aware that we're in a climate emergency. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. I respectfully disagree.
As you should, as a member of the Department of Environmental Protection requesting these funds. I respectfully understand that. The other question I have is regard to the grants to the community organizations, which again to me, that is public information. That is a PR campaign explaining to people in whatever community, however that is determined, that they need to be that they need to modernize their infrastructure. They need to convert to an electric vehicle. I think this is mostly information, and people don't necessarily know the programs we have or don't have, but I think we just need to compel more people to make those switches. I'm waiting. I have about 2 weeks left until the dealership gets me my EV that I've been waiting months for. And so I've been scouring the website, right? I've called a few electricians who will need to come and upgrade my own home to accommodate that. Even as chair of the T&E Committee, I had not thought of contacting the county, right? I've gone online to see how else the private sector can support me, because I already know I'm making that switch. What we need more people to do is make that switch. Not necessarily, I don't think it's necessarily the county's role to play matchmaker, to say, oh, you want to convert, here's an electrician that does that work. I think Google does that work quite well. And so I have some concerns with some of these recommendations. But the last point I will make is regarding BEPS and the climate capacity, or no, the energy audits. It would be my preference that we get the regulations first. And once we get the regulations, we know what the work needs to do, rather than start doing these audits but not knowing what the recommendations are that would best be served by those audits. So again, I think all of this is important, but I think there are other strategic pieces that need to move first to better fortify some of these goals. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and all your work, Mr. Edwards. So the way I approach this, because as Council President Glass said, this is all really important work to do, and how do we prioritize things, particularly, and I just want to thank you both for stepping up as interim deputy and director, because we have to also acknowledge this is a department that's kind of in a transition. I think that's important when we think about, you know, the work moving forward and how we prioritize. So for me, I thought of it as, because of the urgency of this work, how do we not miss opportunities, right? All of this work is important, but what are the things that, like, we absolutely cannot miss an opportunity on? And so what I would put as high priorities, I agree with the council staff on the grant positions and the consultant support, because Mr. Edwards, as you said, there is a ton of things. You get a lot every day. Residents are actually emailing me as well, and I'm sure my office passes it on to you. In addition, you know, as wearing my hat as the chair of the COG board, one of the things that we're doing at COG starting next Wednesday, if you have time to join our meeting, we're actually having people from the federal government come and talk through all that is available to local governments and things that they can do themselves and what we can do as a region and how we can apply for things. And we're starting with energy next week, and then next month we're going to move on to transportation, and I have a whole series on that. Because around the country and in our region, people are asking the same questions that you posed about. There's stuff out there, but you need the capacity to do the grant writing and to investigate, are these things appropriate to us? So I keep those as high priority. On the community choice energy consultant, if there's a category above high priority, I would put this, because we have to move forward with this. And all the work that has gone into getting us to this point, we need to take this across the finish line. It's essential. You know, when I was mayor in Tacoma Park, we had a study done about how we could meet our climate change goals and what we could do. The top thing they said is put all your energy into passing community choice energy, because that is going to be the #1 thing to help reduce greenhouse gases. So for me, that's just, I mean, we shouldn't even be having a conversation about that. That is such a high priority. And the only other thing I'll say that I would put as a high priority, and this is where I'll disagree a bit with Council President Glass, is on the residential electrification. Because for me, this is one of those places that we could miss opportunities. When people decide to make upgrades to their homes, to their appliances and everything else, that's a decision they're living with for at least a decade. You know, when you buy a new stove and redo your kitchen, upgrade your heating, air conditioning, you do that maybe once in a decade or more. And again, from my experience in Tacoma Park, it is bringing together, as we've done in the county, as you've done, the electricians, the people who work on this, to make sure they know what else is out there, because we know when people are sitting down, it's overwhelming to redo your kitchen, to do everything when you're juggling job, kids, pets, everything else. And then to go and to investigate something that you're not familiar with, like new products and other things, can get overwhelming. And I think this is a window we have right now of opportunity. And again, I think if we don't, we're going to miss some folks who are going to invest in new appliances and upgrades, and they'll be stuck with gas for another decade. So for me, those are all the things I would put as a high priority. All the other things are really, really important, and I hope we can get to them in the work you do. But I also think that as a department, filling all your vacancies, I'm glad that's moving forward, getting the leadership in place and everything else. I think we can come back to those. I yield.
I appreciate that, Councilmember Stewart, and in my previous remarks, I neglected to address the staff recommendation, and I didn't talk about those items at all, and I'm glad you did. I agree with the staff recommendation. Hiring folks to do grant management to get us more revenue, more investment to do this work, critically important. It pays for itself, and agree with you about the clean energy choice as well. Really important, and as the state has allowed us to become a leader, we need to get that right, and we would be fulfilling a state obligation in that regard. Thank you. Councilmember Balfour.
Thank you. So I do agree with my with the staff and my colleagues on the high priority items. Absolutely, we need focus on grants. Can you just talk a little bit about how the positions would work with the consultant, and what's the need for the consultant when you have the two FTEs? How do they work together?
Sure. So first of all, the positions are going to take a little time to hire, as we've talked about. But there's will be some learning curve in the process, of course. And a big part of grants, DP uses a lot of grants, DOT, HHS use a lot of grants. If you talk to staff that are involved in grants, what you'll hear is, yeah, getting the grant, identifying the grant is hard, applying for the grant is harder, managing the grant is the hardest part of all. And that's where this staff would really help, particularly staff that has expertise in the subject area. Yeah. Because if you just have people that can apply for the grant, get the grant, and then hand it over to the staff and say, hey, here's a grant, manage that, it's very difficult for that staff person to do all the things they're doing and also manage the grant. And so having the positions is important, we view. It's possible that over time, we don't need the consultant support. We'll build that expertise in-house, and we won't need that going forward. Again, there's just so much money out there now from the federal legislation has been passed. So many opportunities around things that are really important to our climate goals. Real emphasis on heat pumps, electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, in the future resiliency around flooding, and so having that capacity of people who can manage the grants, but initially starting out with both that and experts who can easily identify, yeah, here's a grant that applies to charging infrastructure. Go after that.
I agree with you. I think that is a high priority to have someone July 1st scouring for what these grants are. And so yeah, I appreciate that. Similar with the community choice consultant, I agree with that. And then I think that's kind of where I stop. Is those I agree with staff on the high priority items. So, thank you.
So I'm glad we're in agreement with staff recommendation. I just want to circle back to the item that Councilmember Stewart raised, and that's the electrification. And so I am willing to add that as a priority item, but what I want to better understand is what the functionality would be. If it is somebody who gets called from someone who has questions or concerns, or without describing the position, could you describe the position?
I'll do my best. So, and I'd invite Lindsay Shaw to come up here if she has anything she wants to add to this, but I'll give it my shot, and she can come up and correct me if I've said anything wrong. But so we are working with a consultant right now. We've just finalized a contract with a consultant that can provide kind of a help desk for people who have questions about electrification. I'll give you, my personal example is I had oil heat, and I wanted to convert to a heat pump. And I will tell you that converting from oil to a heat pump is much easier than converting from gas to a heat pump, because I could just go turn the valve on my oil tank off, leave that alone, have someone come in and replace my heating system, my oil heating furnace, to a heat pump. But even that was difficult, because the contractors who came in and looked at my oil furnace said, yeah, we can put you in a more efficient oil furnace. In Montgomery County, and in not just Montgomery County, it's more difficult in Montgomery County, because we've got, if you have a gas permit, you've got to go to WSSC and get them to deal with all that. You've got to get an electrical permit from the county. And so there's just a lot of confusion, and people reach a point where they just kind of say, I can't figure this out. And so the help desk function that we're getting with our consultant is going to be a valuable addition to that. And what this position will help manage that process, but also figure out what are we not doing right? How could we, so we've got the help desk, but people are asking questions that we can't answer. How do we address that? What changes do we need to make to the program? Sure. So that's really where that position comes in. Now you're going to get
getting an assist from Ms. Shaw now.
You're going to pass the ball.
I think you did admirably. But
you did a great job, Stan. Hi, I'm Lindsay Shaw. I work in Stan's division. What we're getting a lot of right now is a need beyond just the PR campaign. We have folks that do great outreach right now on staff that manage the Montgomery Energy Connection program. Larissa Johnson, she's a residential program manager too as well. What we lack in the staff capacity now is the technical expertise, the actual transition from fossil fuels to electric systems. It's more than just PR. People have questions. They want to bounce ideas off of the county to get that unbiased expertise, not necessarily getting 3 quotes from 3 different contractors that are trying to sell their services. There are entities, there's an entity up in the Northeast that evaluates those contracts to tell people if they're getting the wool pulled over their eyes or not. We'd like to have someone on staff that can help residents make that transition, that understands electrification, that understands how heat pumps work, how existing HVAC systems work, and be able to guide them with more technical expertise than just this is the right thing to do for the climate. People have real questions about how their homes currently operate, what their bills are going to look like after they make the transition, if it's really the right thing to do. We want to make sure that with all of the funding coming from the federal government through the IRA, we are getting daily phone calls about how to make this transition, how to access all these tax incentives. We're not tax professionals, but we are professionals in what the conversion should look like for county residents. So we'd like to bring that expertise on.
Appreciate the assist.
No, she gets the points, I get the assist.
There you go.
Let the box score reflect that.
Well said. Well played. So I get that. So I'm willing to add this as a priority item, recognizing the importance of it. But going back to the vacancies and the creating new positions, I would very much like to throw out there that if there are vacancies in DPS that works in technical home inspection and works in this realm, maybe not the environmental space, but repurposing some other vacancies in other departments to be better suited to the year 2023, I welcome the executive branch to rethink some of that organizational chart. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I would say we are working closely with DPS as we move forward into this electrification realm, and have developed a really good relationship with them. And I think they recognize their capacity needs. We recognize ours, and we're.
I'm very glad to hear that. I think we're good with this agenda item, but again, I will just state for the public record that while the county executive for 5 years has talked about transforming and modernizing county government, I think it's opportunities like this where you're looking for someone with technical expertise, with a certain mindset. There is a sister agency where people routinely have that mindset, and if there are vacancies there, well, let's reorganize to help county government meet the current needs of our residents. Mr. Lipchenko?
So what I heard was both Mr. Glass and Ms. Stewart were supportive of the staff recommendation regarding what were high priority. Ms. Balcom
too. No, she too.
Ms. Balcom as well, but also went on to support the electrification as a high priority. So right now that's two to one on that.
Yep.
Okay, got it. All right, next to discuss is the climate change planning NDA. If we're done with any other general fund discussion. The NDA is actually going down a bit this year primarily because there's a transfer recommended of staff. They're currently managed by DEP, but they are reflected in the NDA in FY23. So they would move out of the NDA as part of the FY24 budget. So if you take that shift out, and you also have a shift into the budget, into the NDA of some climate change interns and fellows. that are in the approved FY23 budget for DEP. And the one increase that you have overall in the NDA is to increase the climate change interns and fellows from $85,000 in the 23 base to $170,000 in FY24. So that's the real change, and that's the change that would need to go on the reconciliation list if the committee supports it as a priority or a high priority item. The interns and fellows are managed actually by the climate position in the county executive's office, but would be spread across the departments, similar to a fellows program like we share in here at the council. I'll let DEP talk a little bit more about the rationale for the increase in that, but that's the only significant change when you net out all the shifts in and out of the climate change NDA.
It would be hard to underestimate the value that these fellows and interns have provided to our efforts on climate change. We have this year, I think I heard 100 applicants for our climate fellowship, and we were previously hiring people for a shorter duration, and now we've extended the climate fellow positions to be 9 months. And these are generally people that are either in graduate school or are have graduate degrees even, and are transitioning to trying to find their next job, and they want to work on climate, and they're interested in working for Montgomery County. Really talented folks, and they are able to take on a wide variety of things. And one of the reasons they're in the NDA is because climate change is not just a DEP issue. It crosses across lots of departments. And so whether it's DOT or DPS or emergency management or DGS, the county utilizes the fellows across all these departments. And just yesterday we sent out an email to what we call the climate manager, climate leadership team, thank you, to essentially an application saying we've got new fellows coming on, give us your ideas on how you might want to use those things, use a fellow to achieve a short-term duration thing, although sometimes the project starts under one fellow, continues under another fellow, and so that's why we're asking for the increase. They've been really important supplements to our work.
How much are they compensated? Because I absolutely believe that interns and fellows should be compensated.
Yeah, maybe Ms. Wan has that number. I think it's generally the temporary services contract rate that we pay.
They're under the temporary services, and I believe they're in the climate. I have given Keith the number. I'm sorry.
I mean, what I'm trying to get at is what is this increase, right? The increase in funding, what does it translate to?
Well,
they
I
get
think
paid about $23 an hour for the climate internships.
Yeah, at the executive's recommended level of 170,000, that equates to approximately 4 full-time positions year-round. But of course, these positions may or may not be that long. But yeah, I think it was in the $20 to $23 range per hour that they would be paid. So it depends on how that breaks down in terms of the length of time.
And are these considered full-time positions, or they're part-time?
No, they're temporary. They're temporary staff through a contractor.
Let me rephrase the question. Are they expected to work either an 8-hour day or a 40-hour work week?
40-hour work week, yes.
Right. Got it. Right.
Although we have flexibility depending upon the fellow or the intern. Some of the interns are in college or are even Montgomery County High School students, and so they work a shortened work week. They wouldn't work a full 40-hour week. So we adjust the number of people we can have and host and the time frame based on the budget that we have.
Great. Councilman Balcom.
Thank you. You know, I'm the last one to say, let's spend more money. However, I think this is important because, you know, we're throughout every discussion we've had in this budget process, we've talked about the difficulty in finding workers, and we, as the county, need to put our money where our mouth is in terms of helping with the workforce development, and I think that this should be a high priority.
Thank you. And these students that we bring in, as Stan mentioned, they are high quality, graduate students or graduates that we're allowing them to gain the workforce experience to bring them on possibly as full-time employees.
Yeah, I'll agree. Thank you for that with Councilmember Balcom. I think one of the things when we heard from the fleet services folks when they were here about the apprenticeship program and the importance of getting young people working for the county, getting that experience, and then creating that pipeline. So I would also support this as a high priority.
I'll agree, and especially from the workforce development perspective and helping us where we can. Clearly, you're expressing a need for more support. And if we have eager, bright minds who are willing to lend their support for 6 months to 12 months, however long it is, and we compensate them as we absolutely should, I think that's a win for everybody. So we're all in agreement.
One thing, if I could add briefly, we keep track of the folks who have worked for us, and kind of have get-togethers every now and again. It's remarkable how some of these folks have moved on to places where they may ultimately end up, we might be applying for a grant from the organization they work for example. So yeah, they're on, we don't want to take credit for launching them to success. They're bright people, but they've moved on to bigger and better things. So
there you go.
That's always grateful to, we're always grateful to see
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So committee goes along with staff recommendation.
Well, the staff recommendation technically
it
was
was
a regular
just priority. Right.
It sounds like
so
you were supporting the high priority.
Yeah.
Okay, I've noted that.
Thanks.
I have one other technical issue with the climate change NDA. There is still some residual personnel costs in there covering a portion of the climate change officer's personnel costs from the executive. Given that we've shifted or are supporting the executive's recommendation to shift the other positions out, I think it would make sense to sort of complete the task and make this NDA operating expenses that are, or in this case, contractual costs for staff in some cases, but still operating costs in the broadest sense of the word. And since the staff were managed by DEP, it made sense to move them to DEP. Since the persons in the executive office, I think it makes sense to remove those dollars from the NDA and put them back where the position is. Now, the person may also have other charges to other departments. I'm not getting into that today, but just with regard to the NDA, I think it would, from staff's perspective, make sense to keep it focused on the operating side. Doesn't actually have an impact on the budget per se, it's just where it's reflected.
Understood. We accept that.
Okay. So that's it for the general fund portion of the DEP budget and the climate change NDA.
Great.
Next up, we were going to talk about the Water Quality Protection Fund budget.
Of which I was so eager to talk about before, so yes.
Right.
Look how long it took.
So just briefly, the expenditures in the Water Quality Protection Fund are recommended at $33.9 million. That's an increase of $2.9 million or 9.4%. As with a lot of the other budgets you've heard, there is a crosswalk in the executive's recommended budget that shows all the major recommended changes. I've highlighted some here for more discussion, and also some background on the NPDES MS4 permit, which is the backbone of why all this exists, and where the vast majority of the costs originate from or originate for. And I've also got some discussion of the Water Quality Protection Fund fiscal plan and the charge associated with that, which the council approves each year by resolution. We'll be approving that on Revenue Day, a week from next Wednesday, along with the other charges. That's the day before operating budget reconciliation. So any changes we make or any actions we take on the Water Quality Protection Fund then need to be followed up with the rate action. Just to go over some of the bigger numbers in the operating budget on page 14, I've summarized some of these. And many of them are technical in nature. You've got about $1.6 million in adjustments. You have prevailing wage that is kicking in for some of the work done out of this fund. That's about $1 million. That's related to Bill 3521, which was enacted last year by the council, and they had the most recent contract approved or awarded in February of 2023. So that's an add-on to the budget. We have an annualization of personnel costs, compensation adjustment for 24. You also have some costs out of the Maryland National Capital Planning, Park and Planning Commission funding increase, mostly in parks, but also some in the planning department. So the executive's recommending supporting what parks and the planning department had asked for within this budget. And then also there's a shift of work from the operating budget to the stormwater management CIP. So that's not really a change in work or level of effort, but it does result in a reduction in the budget here. But the major increases that I wanted to talk about are on page 15, and I have a chart, looks similar to the chart you saw for the climate change work. And you can see you've got multiple changes here, including several involving positions. And as with these, I think it's best to hear from DEP as to the intent for these going forward. And overall, the impact is about almost $1.3 million. Staff is supportive of these increases. However, if the committee is interested in seeking to reduce the water quality protection charge, which I'll talk about in a minute, staff would prioritize the permit-related work and also the dealing with the additional stormwater management assets that we have, keeping that level of effort, and then followed by the tree forest programs and the rainscapes increases. The increase in the rate that I just mentioned, it would be going from let me just get this right, $119.50 per year to $128. So for a typical household, a single-family home, that would be typically what they would see on their property tax bill. Townhouses would see a third of that, and then non-residential would pay based on their actual impervious area divided by the impervious area that's assumed in the equivalent residential unit. I know it gets very complicated, but it's a not insignificant increase in the water quality protection charge recommended in the executive's budget. So if there is some interest, each dollar on the charge equals about $355,000 or so. I'm sorry, $370,000 roughly in revenue. So to the degree that goes up a dollar, you're getting $370,000 in revenue. To the degree you try to reduce it, we have to find those reductions, that equipment reduction, or reduce fund balance a little bit. With that, I think I'll let DEP talk about some of their, or talk about the significant initiatives that I had mentioned.
Yeah, I welcome comments. Sure.
Hi, good afternoon. Amy Stevens. I'm in the Watershed Restoration Division. So our initiatives this year kind of fall into primary budget buckets. They're the MS4 permit and the requirements of the MS4 permit that we have to achieve. There are new requirements that came in the permit, and as we are initiating them, we realize we need more staff capacity to handle those. So we have the illicit discharge detection and elimination position. This, and plus, along with funding for consultants, this work is really going to be looking for illicit discharges to our storm drain system, where people are putting pollution into our water. Really, our storm drain system is only supposed to flow when it rains. When it's not raining, there shouldn't be anything coming out of it, but we need somebody to help track that down if we do find it. So that's what this position is going to oversee, the consultant that's going to be doing that work. We have 15,000 miles of storm drain systems in this county, and so we have a lot we have to achieve. And we are going to be really looking at This position will be overseeing the consultant. Now, this is work both on commercial and private as well as public property too. So that's what that position's, the consultant would be roughly about $120,000 a year. We anticipate to do this work. This work is going to be looking at outfalls as well as surveying commercial and industrial areas in the county for pollution. The other position is a good housekeeping and salt management. These are two new initiatives in the MS4 permit. They are focused on municipal operations and really looking at, good housekeeping is looking at our municipal operations that could potentially have pollutants and putting in practices that would eliminate them and working with the staff to do training. So we'd have positions that kind of oversee that and really work with our Department of General Services, Department of Transportation, public schools, as well as many other agencies that might actually have things that they do outside their buildings that they don't realize could create a pollution problem. And then, of course, your salt management, which is a very emerging, important issue for the county, and we need to have a plan in place on our application rates and how we're going to be doing that and where our sensitive watersheds are and really understanding that problem and dealing with it. And that's what this plan is required to do. And then ongoing upkeep of it from that point forward and working with not only the county, but public schools as well. And then finally, we have monitoring requirements that have increased for not only the biological monitoring, that increased by 50%, but now we have bacteria and chloride. And what we are looking for with this water quality specialist position is to really be a field position. We have water quality specialists 2s and 3s. We really need a position that really is dedicated to being in the field, who's actually doing this work, while some of the higher technical staff are actually in the office then reviewing the data, analyzing the data. So we saw with this increase a need for that really dedicated field position, junior staff position. And then of course we will always have new BMPs coming into our program. That's what this additional stormwater BMPs funding is for new stormwater BMPs. I mean, every time we build in this county, stormwater management is required. And it's just going to keep going up. So that's what this item is meant to fund. So those are our primary initiatives. Plus, then we always have increased demand for Rainscapes, a highly demanded program. So we're looking for more funding for that. And then True Montgomery, which we heard earlier, another high demand program. So we're looking for positions.
Great.
So those are our new positions.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us the good work that's being done. The only question I have, or not so much a question, is more of a statement. The ERU, clearly the increase that's being proposed is 7%, which is essentially inflation over the last year and projected. And so I am comfortable with that increase. I'm comfortable with staff recommendation here. I don't know if any colleagues comment? Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. So I just want to go back to the staff issue, right? So we talked at length about the staff in the general fund. So these new 5 positions, I just want to have an understanding. So we talked about there are 15 open positions right now. 4 of them are 100% fully funded in the general fund. How many of those open positions are in this fund? Or you can't because they're funded by different.
Some of them are split. Some of them are split. But also, when we look at vacancies, we want to look at when did they become vacant. So these 15 vacancies, they're all new vacancies, either because staff have left or because we had internal promotions.
Okay.
So if we talk about long-term vacancies, DEP doesn't really have any long-term vacancies as anything more than a year old.
Thank you. And then, so from a process question that, in terms of how we're going forward, feels like we've kind of shifted midstream. So I just want to say that, we've asked the county executive to help ferret out vacancies, and the first response we had was a list of vacancies that showed some of them were vacant for 10 years or more, right? We know that list was not the correct list, and there were so many more nuances. So we asked him again a second time to come back and give us a recommendation for working this out, and that didn't come to fruition. So we're asking a third time to help, understanding that we're not going to, I would never presume to tell you what positions you need and which positions you don't need. The bottom line is we still have 1,500 positions open. Only 556 are currently being filled. So we're asking a third time, how do we fix this? So,
if I could.
Yes, please.
So I can't answer the big questions that you asked. Only the county executive can answer some of those big questions. But I think what differentiates this conversation from the one we just had, and some in other committees and aspects of this committee, is that this is a self-supporting fund. And so Mr. Lubchenco and DEP as well, if you could share with us, I'll start with Mr. Lubchenco. Okay.
It is a self-supporting fund, which we are recommending a rate increase for. So I just put a pin on that.
So let's have this conversation. It's an important one. So where would some of these savings come from, or how would they be used if staffing reductions were to be suggested, or put a more appropriate way, if we did not support the creation of new positions? This being a self-supporting fund, where would those unused funds go?
Well, first, because it is a self-contained enterprise fund, those funds would not be available for tax-supported uses or general fund use. What it would do, if you're reducing expenditures, however you reduce them, whether it's operating expenses or staffing, those reduced expenditures could lead to one or two different things. One, you could have an increased fund balance at the end of the year. Now, maybe you want that increased fund balance as you look at your fiscal plan over time. Alternatively, you could reduce the ERU rate correspondingly to maintain the equivalent fund balance that you already have in the fund. And as we mentioned, it's about $370,000 for every dollar in the ERU rate. For instance, if you were to not approve some of these positions, or if you were to increase lapse assumed in the Water Quality Protection Fund, then an equivalent reduction in the ERU rate could be done, and or you could reduce fund or allow an increase in fund balance to occur from that. But it would not help towards the broader concerns that we have with the tax-supported side of the budget.
I appreciate that, and thank you. So I think that I'm not overly concerned with the ERU rate from a residential perspective, because I think that, as you mentioned, it's 7% inflation. Costs go up. Commercially, I think that's a different story, and at the same time that we're increasing property tax. So I just I feel like I want to put a pin.
Malcolm, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to inform you that the Water Quality Protection Charge actually has a hardship exemption or reduction program for those residential or businesses or nonprofits that have trouble paying the Water Quality Protection Charge. In addition, any commercial or residential property that does treat its stormwater can get up to a 100% credit off its water quality protection charge. So for those that are helping to contribute towards our water quality, they can potentially reduce that charge up to 100%.
Thank you. That's very valuable information. Thank you.
And let me ask, because it was raised, and I very much appreciate you bringing this up, right, so that we can understand, if I'll be candid, if these funds could be used to offset something else, I would be on board, but it is a self-contained fund, self-supporting fund, and allowing the funds just to accrue within the fund, I'd rather put them to use, particularly within environmental protection. But the ERU is the equivalent residential unit. Is that a misnomer? Does that apply to commercial as well?
It's based on 2,406 square feet of
Say that again.
impervious surface. I can go all day on this. 2,406 square feet. So for every 2,406 square feet, commercial properties are charged that ERU rate.
Got it. So it is a misnomer. Maybe we change the name.
But I do appreciate what you just said about the mitigation, and I think that I would assume that most new construction has a mitigation for that. Particularly commercial construction, residential's not quite caught up to that. So I appreciate that, and I think we can go forward.
Great.
But I do like from the personnel vacancies, new positions. I'm putting a pin on that one. So, but I'm good with this. I'm good with this budget here. Thank you.
It is a different type of fund with different types of funds.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, and the
Important
ERU
distinction. Yes.
The creation of the ERU was back in 2001, and it is intended to be, at the time at least, an average imperviousness for a residential single-family home, and then over years, as the charge was modified and advanced to other properties, the idea was to use multipliers of that to create the fee structure. We do have it is a complex regulation if you look at it.
Yeah, I would like to make the suggestion that we change the name, because, as noted, it is not solely for residential purposes.
Sure, we will work on that. It is built in legislation and regulations, so
Okay.
as we all know, that will take time.
Well, let's have more conversations about that.
Happy to.
I'm not quite sure that introducing a bill to change a simple name is the best use of all of our times, but the point's been made, so thank you.
And you'll just have to remind me every year.
What we could do, we could use a more common term for it and then say that is the equivalent residential unit. So there may be a way to, at least in common usage, have a different terminology.
After the budget, we can
while
pick
still
up a
having
thesaurus and figure
the
this
legal
out.
term for it.
Okay, very good. So we're all in agreement with this one. And that is the end of that package.
Those are the first three items for today's agenda, if people are keeping count. The next item before us is the Recycling and Resource Management Division and the FY24 solid waste charges. And this encompasses the Solid Waste Collection Fund and the Solid Waste Disposal Fund. It looks like we have who we need at the table. I'll just provide some quick highlights from the packet, and I have some of this summarized on the first page. Interestingly, this is the first time in memory that I can recall, the total FY24 proposed operating budget is $142.7 million, which is virtually the same as the approved FY23 budget of about $142.64 million. So it's the first time staff can recall a 0.0% increase overall. And actually the increases are not much different when you break it down by fund. The collection fund's up about 0.8%, and the solid waste disposal fund is basically just slightly down, but basically 0%. The funds and the charges are the result of a very complex rate model that staff works with DEP on each year, and we can talk about some of that as we go through the packet. But what I try to focus on in the packet are as with the other budgets, is the major recommended changes on the expenditure side, and then how those would play out in terms of the charges. And first talking about the solid waste collection fund. That's about actually I'm looking at let me bring that up. In the solid waste collection fund, I have a summary of those numbers on page 4 of the packet. It's the much smaller of the funds. It's covering the basically, for the most part, trash collection in Subdistrict A, where the county manages the contracts for trash collection. So Subdistrict B, where residents and we're talking about single family as well. Non-residential and multifamily are not covered in Subdistrict A either. In Subdistrict B, in addition, you have the single-family homes that also are outside of the county's contract process. They manage their own contracting either directly or through HOAs. And also with municipalities, that's also a little bit different as well. But in the collection fund, the total for the collection fund is about $11.4 million recommended. That's about a $92,000 increase from FY23. Once again, a very small increase. The bulk of the costs are for the residential refuse collection costs in Subdistrict A and some personnel costs. The refuse collection contracts are actually only up about 2% this year. In past years, and we can talk about this more, there's been some very significant increases over the past 5 years as contracts have come up. There's a variety of issues associated with that, including a restructuring of the contracts to a shorter time period, which creates some issues when you have upfront costs that haulers have to deal with in terms of purchasing equipment. And they've also had significant increases in just the contracts as they've come up. They also had a challenge with an emergency contract issue about 5 years ago that required them to step in when a contractor was unable to fulfill their contract. So those different issues have led the fund to have some significant fiscal challenges, and they could not increase rates sufficiently on the revenue side to accommodate those increases. So they did a loan from the disposal fund in order to smooth those rates over time as best they could. But we are seeing a significant increase this year in FY24 recommended by the executive in the collection charge to bring the fund back to a positive fund balance sooner than it had been projected in past years, and we can talk more about that. So the collection charge itself, I think I have that. Yeah, the collection charge itself, and this is for folks in Subdistrict A, would be increasing from $127 per year to $160 per year. Even though, as I mentioned earlier, the expenditure side is relatively the same, not much increase on the expenditure side. But what we have is a fiscal plan issue, and we have a fund balance issue that we're having to deal with this year. So other than that, there are only really technical adjustments in the collection fund, not much to talk about in terms of new. So we just have this fiscal challenge and the need to try to bring the fund back to health.
Thank you for that, Mr. Lutchenko. If DEP could explain that fund in balance, that would be very helpful.
Do you want to take it, or will you?
Sure. I can discuss that. The fund has been running in a deficit of close to negative 40% for the past few years. We had an IG work plan audit this past year that revealed that the fund balance policy sets the county's policy at 10 to 15%. So the county executive had committed to increasing the rates so that we can meet the minimum fund balance policy. Other than that, as Mr. Lutchenko had mentioned, the rates itself, the contract rates are not increasing.
What is the implication to having that fund imbalance?
Well, the fund balance policy requires that we either have a 10 to 15% fund balance policy or enough reserves to fund a catastrophic failure for 6 months if any one of our contract collectors were to not provide services. At this point, the fund does not have that, which is exactly what happened back in 2018, where we had to borrow from the disposal fund. Now, the disposal fund is also looking at it's never a good thing when you're running an enterprise to have to borrow from other resources to fund its minimum requirements. And so we're looking to pay back the disposal fund. In addition, as you reviewed the January capital budget, which you'll also take up at full council, we are going to issue debt in order to fund the recycling center upgrades. The disposal fund is the backing for that debt service. So there are multiple things that are
So yeah, you've just added a few very intriguing elements, right? So before I lose them independently, one, curious as to if you can explain why we over the last number of years got to a negative 40% fund balance, right? Or decrease 40% fund balance, however you want to compute that. But then secondly, it sounds like you're saying that this increase is going to be bondable to help with the recycling center. Am I understanding that?
No, so the $4 million is borrowed from the disposal fund, which is going to be the backing of the debt that we will issue. And so we should, to our shareholders, say that there is to the bondholders that there's a commitment to pay back that $4 million.
Good. Okay. And then what is the update on the recycling center?
The recycling,
Yes, hi. Willie Weiner, Acting Director and also Division Manager for the Recycling and Resource Management Division. So we still working on the basis of design for the material recovery facility. We should have a final design probably in the next few weeks. After that, we are going to be issuing a request for proposals to get the equipment. So we're going to be developing the request for proposals in the next 2 months. We are expecting to publish that request for proposals sometime early September, late August, early September. And after that, of course, there is a process for getting the equipment. But
sure.
Right now we are planning on our timeline shows that we will have a new operating facility by the end of 2025.
Fantastic. That's a great timeline, and I love these conversations because I call it a recycling center, and you call it a material recovery facility. Recognizing it's more than just recycling, I get it. Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
No, I just say,
sorry.
yeah, no, this looks great, and I do want to just highlight one of the things that you all started doing is the heavy medical equipment recycling, which is terrific, and I'm so glad that we're able to expand that. And since my family has many crutches in our basement, I will be visiting someday soon, but I'm good with this piece of it. Thank you.
Okay, without objection.
All right. Moving on to the disposal fund, the bigger of the two funds. I have those numbers on page 6 of the packet. And once again, as I mentioned, we're seeing basically a flatline change overall. But if you looked at some of the attachments in the packet, you have a lot of numbers, significant numbers going up and down. Most significantly, you have a very large increase in electricity revenue assumed at the resource recovery facility in FY24 that I think it was about $6 million more than FY23. That alone is offsetting a number of other increases. So I did want to mention that. And yeah, I mentioned there's some large increases and decreases. In terms of the, let's see. Just want to get to, yes, okay. Yeah, let me talk about some of the significant items I did want to mention. And there are new positions recommended in this portion of the budget that I wanted to note. On page 6 of the packet, I mentioned there's 3 new positions recommended for waste reduction efforts and combined with the multifamily recycling. And I've got some write-up in this. but I thought it would be helpful to hear from DEP directly on those in particular.
Sure, thank you. For the record, my name is Eileen Kao, and I head up the Waste Reduction and Recycling section in the Recycling and Resource Management Division. So we have 3 positions that are recommended as new positions for FY24. One of the positions is a recycling investigator on the multifamily sector. We have in Montgomery County actually recycling regulations and mandates, requirements across the board. We have requirements of single-family sector. We have requirements in the multifamily sector, which is apartments, condominiums, and co-ops. We also have mandates for recycling and reporting by the business community, and that includes your for-profit ventures, your nonprofit organizations, as well as every type of government facility, federal, state, as well as local, that are located here in Montgomery County. So we have a number of initiatives within the division. We've got the softer side of the outreach, education, technical assistance, training, that type of thing. However, when you have mandates, there are also what we call tougher nuts to crack at times, tougher situations where there is at times willful effort to not comply with the requirements, and our requirements actually go back to 1991. That is when we passed our first set of recycling regulations. So right now what we have in the multifamily sector is we have 1 investigator that covers the entire county. We have approximately 730 multifamily properties, and that number is growing. We currently have an estimated 145,000 dwelling units within those multifamily properties. So we really want to have an additional investigator on that team so that we can actually geographically divide the county into 2 areas where 1 investigator on multifamily will focus on, one of the 2 areas, and will work concertedly with the properties that are within that area. We have a lot of sources of our investigation cases. We have referrals internally from our own staff who've been working with multifamily properties, and at a point will refer the case over to the investigator because, again, there's a kind of a willfulness to not comply with the requirements. We also have folks in the community who will alert us to issues. They will call in or email complaints to us. And then also we've got the investigators working their areas. In this case right now, the 1 investigator works the entire county and is able to really focus and try and recognize when things are out of alignment or there are issues. Overflowing dumpsters, for example, bulky trash that's on the ground, those are all indications of inadequate capacity for either trash or recycling. And I should say that the investigators also are ensuring enforcement with the requirements of Chapter 48, our solid waste laws, as well as legislation now that bans the use of or provision of certain materials. So there is really a full plate, and so we really need that position as a second investigator for multifamily. The other positions that are part of the CE's recommended budget are to expand in an area for planning of new zero waste initiatives. Zero waste is it's really not an entirely new thing. It's kind of a newer term that we're using. We have had very ambitious goals over the years to further reduce waste generated in Montgomery County and to increase the amount of materials that are recycled. All of those are part of our zero waste initiative. So over the years we've really tried to research, develop, design, implement, and manage even more initiatives, programs, activities to help everyone across the board in Montgomery County to further reduce their waste and reuse materials like the durable medical equipment program, and then also to recycle everything that's possible to recycle. And at this point, we've gotten to our capacity with our existing team.
Sure.
You know, we're doing a lot, especially just trying to move the ball forward on all fronts. And you probably also are familiar with all of the different newer initiatives that we are now implementing concerning food scraps or food waste.
Right.
We have really gotten to a point where we need more staff members on our team to be able to do even more and continue this great progress moving forward. So the two positions that are part of the CE's recommended budget, there is a, an environmental planning policy analyst, which functionally is the zero waste planning manager, as well as a zero waste coordinator, which is a senior planning specialist. And these folks really are going to really focus on researching, designing, developing additional initiatives, whether they're new initiatives or expanded initiatives of ones that we currently have, to be able to, again, allow residents in Montgomery County, multifamily properties, businesses to further reduce the amount of waste that they generate, to really increase our level of reuse of materials,
Yep.
and to be able to recycle more.
And that is the goal, right? If we want to close the incinerator, if we want to be better stewards of the planet, we have to reduce, reuse, recycle, and we need to continue, we need to rebuild the facility, right, so that it can accommodate all the new types of plastics and materials that it currently is unable to do so. And we need to make sure that we do not continue adding food scraps and other things that have other outlets for being repurposed. Let me ask, I'm not sure if it's in this part of the budget, but where, or at least where in the budget, is the residential composting program? Is it in this section of the budget?
You mean the pilot?
Correct.
that we have? Yes, it's in here.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about that? My understanding is that when it was first created about 3 years ago or so now, there was a Potomac and a Silver Spring pilot area, and now it's expanded a little bit more.
Right.
Bethesda and Rockville, I've heard.
Yes.
Can you talk a bit about that?
So, yes. Phase one of our pilot, which we launched the collections in our, let me see, we started with Silver Spring, and that was in November of 2021. And we currently have 700 and some homes in the Silver Spring area that are participating, continue to participate in that pilot. About a month later, in December of 2021, we brought on the households in a portion of the Potomac area, and we currently have about over 350 households in that area participating in the pilot. So we provide the once-a-week collection of their food scraps in those areas. In these pilots, we provide them a 35-gallon cart in which they put all of their food scraps and put that out for one-time-a-week collection by our contracted collector, who then takes that material over to a facility for processing. We also provide to them, the participating households, a 2-gallon in-kitchen caddy, as well as biodegradable compostable liners. And we provide educational materials on the do's and don'ts and how-tos. So that was phase one, and they continue and they do very well. And in fact, we are finalizing now. We had done surveys at the 3-month, 6-month, 9-month mark, and then at the 12-month mark with those two areas, we did focus group sessions to try and get a lot of feedback from their experience. And they actually overwhelmingly really do like the program and want to be able to continue. We initiated phase two, and so in March of 2023, we launched the third area, and the third area is a portion of the Bethesda area. And we have about, actually we have the same number as the Potomac area, over 350 households are participating in that area. We are currently still recruiting in the 4th area of the pilot, and that is a portion of Gaithersburg, Montgomery Village. At this point, though, the recruitment continues because right now we have less than 200 households signed up for that pilot, and we would like that number to be increased before we launch.
Thank you for that. It's a great program. I live in the Silver Spring pilot area, and so while I have my own backyard composter, I am not participating in the program, but today was trash collection day and I saw those bins all over the place, and so people certainly are utilizing them. I would suggest that the outreach, again, public relations or information sharing, be increased in probably all the areas except for Silver Spring, since that's near capacity, so that more people are aware. Not only that they know the county is doing it, but that it is beneficial. Because I'm going to circle back to the point I made earlier, that so much of this, if we want our community to participate, if we want them to convert from gasoline to electric cars, from gas stove to electric stove, or very simple, the simplest thing of all is throwing your food scraps in a little bucket. They need to know the benefits of it, and they need to know that we're providing those services.
Thank you for that comment. And we do continue. We keep adding in all of the areas any additional households, and we keep on recruiting and letting them know it's available and asking them to sign up.
And I don't see any comments from my
I
colleagues.
just have one, sorry,
Yeah.
just to follow up on the composting. Are there plans to add new areas? I have a bunch of neighborhoods who are very disappointed that they did not get picked, and we get very frequent requests. So what are the plans to add new areas?
So these are phases 1 and 2 of our pilot program, and the plans for the pilot are to really sunset the pilots, but our hope is to dovetail into the more permanent, long-term program. And all of the data and we're taking in a lot of data weekly, every collection, but in addition doing the survey feedback work. And we're taking all of that information to try and use all of that in order to inform our planning for that permanent, broader countywide program.
What's very important, once we are talking about expanding programs, and is the processing capacity.
Right.
And so that's the bottleneck right now for these. And so what we have is currently we have a request for proposal has been awarded to a contractor to looks for basically working on organics as a whole. And this contractor is going to be proposing what type of technology we need for being able to expand these programs to county-wide programs, and also what type of method we're going to be using, because there is a possibility, depending on the technology that you use, that instead of collecting food scraps separated from, let's say, yard waste, that you can combine them, and so you don't have additional trucks on the street, and you do a collection. But it depends on the technology, and it depends on the site that we're going to be using for building this processing capacity. So this work is going in conjunction with our programs for food scraps. We are working with the contractor. Actually, we had a meeting yesterday, and we are expecting a draft report sometime in August, and the final report beginning of September of this year.
Great. Terrific. And I'll just say, as the district person for the district that has the most multifamily buildings, I fully support adding another person for that enforcement.
I just wanted to add, and thank you for that. I fully support this project, and I have a community in Germantown that Mr. Levchenko is right across the street. He and I can be your first 2 subscribers if you when you go up there. Oh, good. There you go. But I also want to say that this this is an area, when we talked about potential grants, this is going to be, I think, not only nationwide, countrywide, worldwide. This is a technology I think that's going to continue to change and change and change. So that's a possibility for potential grant down the way. So thank you.
And last thing I would note is I remember a number of years ago when Director Ortiz was working at the department helping gear up for this program, I made the comment that as we engage in this work, we need to work with some of our local green entrepreneurs. And I'm glad that this program is doing that rather than going with national trash collectors who recognize the money to be made and are engaging in these types of programs as well. But one of the things about working with local entrepreneurs is if we work with them, we need to commit to them. And so that is where the increasing the level of participation is not only good for the planet and our community, but it's good for our local entrepreneurs as well. So just throw that out there. So thank you. So staff, council supports staff recommendation.
All right, next on page 7, I mentioned the RF earlier and the electric sales revenue. I was actually mistaken. It's actually an $8.2 million increase. Otherwise, you'd have about a $6.4 million net increase in that program if you didn't have that electric sales revenue. And we've got some discussion of why the costs are up and down in that program. You'd alluded to earlier the interest in closing the incinerator that the executive has noted a number of times, and I've got some background on that in the packet. And we do currently have or the executive had put out a request for expressions of interest that the responses will be coming back very, very soon on that. So we may be hearing a lot more on that in the near future. I do clarify in the packet the process involved if and when we revisit the issue of the incinerator. It was a discussion during the 10-year plan update a couple of years ago that Mr. Glass may remember. There's a lot of analysis that needs to go into that, and I think it is a opportune time to do that. I think that the county does need to decide if the incinerator were to remain open for another 20 or 30 years, it would need to get an infusion of money into it to upgrade it to different levels depending on what the county wants to achieve with the facility, or if we are moving to another option. We need to avoid those future costs. We need to know what those costs would be, and there's a lot of issues: operational issues, cost issues, racial equity issues, greenhouse gas reduction issues. So there's a whole menu of things that would need to be looked at. And I know we could talk at the table a lot about this today, but I just wanted to note that that is something that the executive is actively studying, and the council has noted the issues that it is interested in, that the executive bring to us if we are to move forward with an amendment to the 10-year plan to change our primary method of disposal. So that is an issue that's been outstanding for several years, and we'll see if there's any movement on that in the coming months. And let's see if Mr. Wayner has anything to add to that. Well,
I'd actually prefer not to get into that conversation right now if we don't need to. I know there are active conversations taking place, and let's wait for the more appropriate time. Turn on your mic, Mr. Lopchenko.
Keep forgetting whether I'm on or off. Another issue I wanted to note in the packet, this is not really a significant cost issue. We did see spread across different departments an inflationary adjustment for nonprofit service provider contracts, and there is that is also within the disposal fund budget for one nonprofit, a wider circle, which I've noted here. The committee's had some discussion about the provision of this contract in the past, not so much the merit of the work that the nonprofit provider is doing, but more whether this is the appropriate place to have some of this funding. For years, there's been funding for this nonprofit in the Department of Housing and Community Affairs as well as HHS, but there's also been a funding for this in the Solid Waste Disposal Fund. And I've noted that the nexus for this funding was that the nonprofit is providing an alternative for households and businesses to otherwise dispose of their items in the solid waste system. But that is not really the primary purpose of A Wider Circle. Their job, if you look on their website, is to help families and poverty. Also, there are other nonprofits that are doing similar work that are not funded out of this fund. And I think we do have an opportunity this fall. The Office of Grants Management will be reviewing community grant contracts to nonprofits and considering how to best position them for county funding and where the appropriate places are. And staff just suggests that this contract be considered in that context. So I'm not suggesting any change in the FY24 recommended budget, but just that it be part of that discussion in the fall with the other nonprofits.
Yeah, so I'm glad there's no change in this budget, and I will say the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee has had a lot of very in-depth discussions regarding the shift and the Office of Grant Management, and one of the concerns we have as a committee is making sure that some of these legacy nonprofits that we're communicating well with them about their funding streams, and that we're doing that. So again, A Wider Circle, it falls into that category, and I'm glad we're not moving them for this year. And I just want to make sure in those conversations that we come back to this, and there may be good reason part of them stays in this budget.
The next item I wanted to mention are the residential recycling collection contracts. In FY23, this became the single biggest program in the disposal fund at $35.7 million. It's actually recommended increase relatively small amount this year, about 1.2% or 427,000. But as with the refuse collection contracts, there had been significant cost increases in recent years, and I've got some background on those contracts and some of the reasons for that. But because many of the contracts that are up for rebid this year are late in the fiscal year, we're not seeing a big impact in FY24. But correspondingly, we could see a significant increase in FY25 if these contracts come in at some of the high levels that they've seen in recent years. So just as a FYI to the committee, we may see that come back next year. And then another item I wanted to mention is the Save As You Throw pilot. There was funding in the FY23 budget for that, and I know DEP is in the process of developing a pilot project. It can get pretty complicated given our relatively complex structure of solid waste charges. But just wanted to note that's something that we can look at after budget when DEP has more information from their consultant on how they want to move forward with this pilot program. There's a lot of intersecting issues here in terms of how you would do this program in Subdistrict A versus Subdistrict B. That does raise the question again of our subdistrict construction and whether the committee wants to revisit that issue. And I know
well, I don't know if the committee wants to revisit that issue, but it is an issue that two of my colleagues have not yet visited. Right.
So anyway, once again, that would be a in-depth after budget discussion.
Yes.
But just wanted to let you know that's on the horizon, and we should expect to hear more about this program in the coming months. In terms of the charges themselves, I did want to lay out the impacts that the Montgomery County residents and businesses would see. I've got a chart on page 11 of the packet, which summarizes the different charges and who pays them by single family, multifamily, and non-residential. And I mentioned earlier the refuse collection charge. You can see that a little bit down in the first section, the 127 to the 160. So that's a significant impact on single family properties in Subdistrict A. However, you're also seeing some increases in the other fees as well. It just depends on which services the properties are getting. If they're getting, if they're in the leaf vacuuming district, for instance, they'll see a slight increase in that. The disposal fee is going up as well, and the base systems benefit charge is actually going down slightly, and once again, there's a lot of nuances to this, whereas the incremental systems benefit charge is going up slightly. So I tried to circle the areas to show what the range of impact would be based on the services one is getting. And you can see for a single family, you're looking at a 1.8% increase up to about a 9.2% increase. And then on the multifamily side, you're seeing a 1.2% increase to a 1.8% increase. And then on the non-residential, they're actually seeing a decrease. This is related to the some of the base systems benefit charge you see above, which is going down. They're not getting these other services that are seeing some increases. So they are actually seeing a slight decrease this year. And also we have the impacts from some of the specific changes in the tipping fees that are recommended. The tipping fees at the transfer station help provide a flow control, if you will. As the county sees waste going in that they don't want to receive, they can increase the fee to try to encourage folks to go elsewhere, either for recycling of certain materials like construction and demolition debris, or if they're seeing materials coming from outside the county, that might be another reason to increase the tipping fee. So the tipping fee for loads above 500 pounds is recommended to go up by $10 from $60 to $70, and the refuse and open top containers is recommended to go up from $76 to $84. So that's sort of a summary of the charges. And if any council members are interested, I'm happy to go over with them, perhaps in the privacy of their offices, how these charges work their way through the rate model. It's a very complex model, and I'm happy to go over that with you if you're interested. And I've got descriptions of each of the charges here as well in the packet, but with that, I'll just say that staff is recommending approval of these charges as transmitted by the executive. As I mentioned, they, with the water quality protection charge earlier, these charges are approved by resolution on our revenue day, a week from Wednesday, the day before you would reconcile the operating budget and the CIP.
Any comments?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make a comment that, you know, as we're looking at property tax increase and all the other enterprise funds or other funds, we're looking at increases. So the property tax increase is not the only tax increase that the residents are going to face, and commercial for that matter. So I just wanted to recognize that. I agree with the assessment. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
So without objection, we support staff recommendation. And then final item.
Yeah, that was packet 4.
Yep.
Packet 5 are actually additional CIP amendments to the stormwater management area or portion of the CIP. And these go back to the transmittal by the executive on March 15th of 3 amendments to 3 different projects in the stormwater management program. And I've got them basically just detailed out pretty quickly in this packet, starting on page 2. First, we have the facility planning stormwater management project. This is actually a shift. I had mentioned this shift earlier in the water quality protection fund, the $778,000. This is where it's shifting to in the facility planning stormwater management budget. It's still current revenue within the water quality protection fund, so it doesn't have a material impact on affordability. But there are, and it's also obviously separate from our general fund and tax supported funds. But it does consolidate some work within the CIP, and also for technical reasons does help with a debt service coverage ratio in the operating budget. So staff does not have any issues with this amendment.
And I don't think we do either.
The next one is the flood control study. The committee talked about this during its first review of the stormwater management amendments back from the January transmittal. And at the time, you did get a briefing from DEP. Those slides are actually included in this packet as well. You had heard that phase 2 was, or we're heading towards a phase 2 where we'd be looking at more detailed hydraulic analysis of watersheds and beginning to look at the development of strategies for dealing with those issues. So this is the phase 2 that was being talked about. And so you can see about another $2.8 million in across 24 and 25 that would go towards that more detailed work in those watersheds. And actually they're doing a pilot watershed in Sligo Creek to identify some best practices for how to expand that phase 2 work to the other watersheds they're going to be looking at. So I don't want to belabor what the committee discussed at its previous meeting, but I do have some of that discussion in here. But staff is supportive of this amendment.
As are we.
The third item is the Wheaton Regional Dam Flooding Mitigation Project. We'd also discussed this at the previous committee work session because the Dennis Avenue Bridge Replacement Project, which this project is linked to, was recommended for delay by the executive. And based on that delay, and I've got some discussion of why that project was delayed in here, including some additional updated construction costs as well as utility relocations. Because that project's being delayed, this project also needs to be delayed a little bit. Also, there is some state aid that became available that can offset a little bit of the water quality protection bonds for this project. So that can also be done as part of this amendment. So it's doing two things. One, it's pushing back the construction schedule 1 year to reflect the reality of the bridge project being delayed. And then it's also identifying or noting the state aid and switching out state aid for water quality protection bonds. And staff recommends approval of that.
And we concur with staff recommendation. And that takes us to the end of the packets and of today's budget conversations. Very thorough discussion. You know, this budget is not an easy budget. You know, I'll end as I started and welcome comments from colleagues if they want to add. But we recognize that climate change is happening and the future of our planet and our community are dependent on our ability to adapt, adopt, and modernize, and the work that you all are doing is going to help us get to that place. The fiscal realities augment what we're capable of doing, but we are all in this work, and I appreciate especially the conversations, better understanding some of the programs you all want to create, and helping refine them a little bit, given the realities that we're in. But I think we've landed in a good spot. Any comments?
No, just to say thank you. I really appreciate it and look forward to continuing the work together.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you as well. Having two new council members on this committee, I'll speak for myself. I appreciate the patience that you've taken with our questions, and thank you.
You all have been wonderful, and I watched the GO committee with Director Anderson where she echoed, you know, people come to public service because they are passionate about topics. I can tell you I've been in DEP for over 17 years, and you will not find a group of more passionate people about the environment, about recycling, about everything, you know, climate related. So we appreciate your support.
Well said. And with that, we're adjourned.